A couple of weeks ago I made some music using MIDI SID and then talked about the techniques I'd used. I said I'd talk about a couple of problems I'd experienced and then went on to talk about one problem. I had scripted the other but decided to leave it out at the time. In case you've experienced the same issue, I'd like to show you the problem, the workaround I have been using, and a couple of diagnostic tools I used to find the cause, and a neat DIY solution. Then I'll play some music to demonstrate it. For a long time, when I've been sending MIDI from Logic Pro to a MIDI instrument, I've noticed that some notes aren't heard when more than one note or other MIDI message happen at exactly the same time. This isn't a problem when you play the notes in because you can never be that accurate, but it becomes a problem if you quantize or enter the notes or control messages with the mouse. I used to think it was Logic Pro, and the workaround wasn't too difficult. This is the list editor showing events in a given region. This position column has the timing of all the events in a region, and these numbers are bar number, beat number, I think the third number is 16th notes and the last is ticks, of which there are 240 within a 16th note. So we're dealing with very tiny amounts of time. I've found that simply staggering them a little by 1 or 2 ticks is enough to make sure that they all work.
We need a more permanent solution to our problem.
I decided to look into exactly what was happening and where the information was being lost. The first step was to look at what Logic was sending. I really like MIDI Monitor and use it a lot. It allows you to see messages that are being sent by any application to any destination. I set up a bunch of test control messages and program change messages to happen at the same time. MIDI Monitor showed me that they were all being sent from Logic to the USB MIDI adapter, so Logic wasn't at fault. I'm sorry for doubting you. Next I wondered whether MIDI SID might be dropping bytes. I'll say right away, no it wasn't. It's very robust, uses a modern microcontroller which is very fast compared to the baud rate of standard MIDI. It uses interrupts to catch the incoming MIDI bytes and buffer them. To verify that, I made a special version of the firmware which reports every byte of MIDI it receives to a terminal. Here it is, and some messages are missing. The fact that entire messages are missing is significant. If MIDI SID wasn't handling all of the incoming data properly, you'd expect to see missing bytes, but I've only ever seen complete messages missing. This leaves my USB MIDI converter. And this makes a lot of sense. MIDI over USB is very fast compared to traditional MIDI, which means that this must necessarily buffer the data because messages could come in faster than they can be sent out. I assume that this buffers entire messages before sending them out, perhaps only a single message at a time, and that's why it's dropping entire messages. To verify this, I cobbled together this USB MIDI adapter of my own, and I gave it an unnecessarily huge circular buffer. And that cured the problem. All messages are received every time. I only got as far as MIDI out with this one. That's passing MIDI from the USB to the 5-pin DIN. So the next step was to build a device with both MIDI in and MIDI out circuits. Before I designed my own PCB, I checked the internet to see whether anyone had already done what I had in mind. And the first result was somebody I know well, Kevin from DIY Electro Music. He has managed to pack the MIDI circuitry and the 2 5-pin DIN sockets onto this hat, which has the footprint of the Pi Pico. And he's made the design files for the PCB freely available. It's excellent work and generous of him. Links in the description. I added those PCBs to one of my orders, and a week or two later they arrived. Here's my first build of that. My firmware is still only passing through in one direction, so the next step is to add the MIDI in to the firmware that will pass the MIDI in to the USB. Then find some way to enclose this, but this will be replacing my USB MIDI interface in my setup. I'll leave you with a piece of music I wrote a long time ago and have shown running on a real 64 in 3 voices, but I don't think I've run it on dual SIDs with 6 voices. It's called Eastern Promise. As in the last video, I'm using Logic as a sequencer. It's sending the MIDI to MIDI SID to be rendered on the 6 voices of 2 SIDs. Now without any issues with drop notes.